Hi guys, welcome back to my channel Lush Foliage. In today's video we are going to be talking about how to rejuvenate the old soil or how to reuse the old soil, because I often am asked what should we do with the old soil. Should we throw it out or should we reuse it again? Now remember guys, there is no expiration date or the soil never expires. It is going to stay like that. The only thing is that over the period of time the soil tends to lose its nutrients and it tends to lose the fertility in the soil, which can be easily rejuvenated and activated once again with the following methods. Now this is both if you have a soil that was in a pot for a very long time, as you can see this one is in the pot for a very long time, or a regular soil which you feel that it is not going to be appropriate to be used in the potting mix. This method will work out for both. So here on the right hand side I have soil from the pot. The plant was not there in this, it was sitting just like that, so probably the soil has become very old, as you can see. So definitely it might have lost all the fertility in the soil. There might not be any nutrients in the soil. So how we are going to be rejuvenating it? So I'll just take out all the dirt, that is the roots or whatever is present. It's absolutely okay to leave it as well, there is no issue. Now the next thing what we'll do is we will try to even the soil. We'll try to break all those bigger rocks if there are any in that, and if there are any rocks that are not breaking, we will just take them out and we're going to keep it aside. We can use this later on as well. In order to cover the drain hole, we can use these rocks. So now we will just kind of smash all the soil and try to level it up. You can even mix both of the soil mix together and you will find rocks, just keep them aside. Remember, in gardening nothing goes in waste, everything will be used at some point or the other. So these rocks will be used at the base of any pots in order to cover the drain hole. So now that we are done leveling it up, once the bigger rocks are all taken out, the next step what we'll do is, after this, now I don't have sun right now, so I'll put a clip of another video what I usually tend to do. For 3 to 4 days, keep this soil in direct afternoon sunlight. Let it get heated up a little bit, let it get warm, and when you are putting it out in direct sunlight, just sprinkle a little bit of water. This is just plain water, you just need to sprinkle it little bit. Now guys, don't pour a lot of water. You do not want to make the the soil soggy wet. You just need to moisten it a little bit. So you'll just add a little bit of water and then leave it in the afternoon sunlight. So once that's done, after 3 to 4 days, what you can do is, now I personally do not use any solid fertilizers. I only tend to use liquid fertilizer. So here I have my compost tea. Now what compost tea is? Compost tea is basically when you compost, there is going to be liquid that will be coming out, which is highly nutrient for the soil. It helps to increase the fertility in the soil. So it's very important. If you are a person who tends to make compost at home, do not throw that liquid, the compost tea. You can always use it. Now guys, because this is just soil, there are no plants in it, I can use this in a concentrated form. But if you have plants, never use it in a concentrated form, otherwise your plant will die. So you have to be extremely careful. You always have to dilute it and use it for plants. But here in this soil we do not have any plants, so it's absolutely okay to put it in the soil like this. Now I'm just going to add very little because there is not much soil in this. This is just an example. So that's all about it, and we are again going to leave it in open. So I've not used completely. Now guys, the entire process I'm just showing you to in this video because this is a very short video. So I'm showing you to everything what you have to do. But this entire process can take you anywhere from 1 month to 1.5 to 2 months as well. Then the soil is going to be completely ready. But in this video I'm showing you a little bit faster because it's going to take a very long time to make the entire video. It might even take 2 months. I do not have a lot of space to store the video content, so I'm just showing you to in one video. Now after this has been mixed, you have to just take the soil and just mix it nicely. Now it will be a little wet, which is absolutely okay. You have to again put it in morning sunlight. Now after this, after the 3 to 4 days of keeping it in afternoon sunlight, after that you do not need to keep it in afternoon sunlight. You have to just keep it in indirect bright light. You can even give some morning sunlight as well, and slowly and steadily the soil will start to regain its fertility. It will not be very fertile because I do not use any chemicals. It's all organic. Even this compost tea that you've seen was from the kitchen waste that we had taken. Now, you might be wondering, why not add compost directly? You can add compost directly, but what happens is that a lot of times when we tend to make a mix like this, it is in a very large quantity. This is just an example, so it's a very small quantity. I usually do this and I keep it in a large drum. So that's why I am not very sure in future for what plant I will be using this soil, because some plants do not like a lot of fertilizers in the initial stage when you tend to pot your plants. So in this, there is a very little amount of fertilizer. There is not much, and it is in an organic form. I do not use any chemicals. So this is a very organic type of form. So this is how you tend to rejuvenate your soil. Now, when you are going to keep it in morning direct sunlight, slowly the soil will start to dry out, and then you can again do the same process. Every 15 days, add a little bit of water and moisten the soil, and in this way, slowly and steadily, the soil will start getting alive. It will get life in it back. The nutrients and the fertilizers will start to increase. So you can do this adding of this compost tea once in 15 days. Like if say that this is going to be there for a month, every 15 days you can add this little bit of the compost tea in your soil in order to make it little fertile. If you want, you can add a little bit of leaf compost as well, but what I tend to do is I do not add any of it. I just rejuvenate the soil and then I put it back into a drum. Now guys, remember, whenever you are putting it in a drum, if you're keeping it open, there is no issue, but if you're putting it in a drum and you're closing the lid, like if you're completely covering the drum with a lid, then you have to ensure that there shouldn't be even 1% of moisture in this. Otherwise, when you are going to keep it in the drum, because there is going to be moisture trapped in it, there could be a chance of fungus or mold growing in it. So you have to be extremely careful. If you're storing it, you have to ensure that it has to be completely bone dry, completely pad dry. Now, as you can see, slowly this thing will work over the period of 1 to 2 months. You have to just keep mixing it. So in that 1 to 2 months time, you have to keep mixing it, not every day, probably every 3 to 4 days, just keep mixing it a little bit so that the soil can dry. Apart from that, all of those and the compost tea that we have put in this should mix very well with the soil mix. Now, as I said, this will take around 1.5 months. If you do not have soil mix, you can directly use it in your new plants after a month. And if you want to store it and you want to keep it, as I said, you will have to ensure that all of the moisture, like for example, this one, as of now, there is a lot of moisture. I cannot store it in a closed container. It has to be completely bone dry. For that, you can again put it in the afternoon sunlight. If you want to speed the process of drying, you can put it in afternoon direct sunlight. There is no issue with that. The soil will still remain fertile. It will still remain nutritious. But as I said, it is going to take a very long time. Now, in between, whenever you are going to move the soil around, you can even use some wood ash as well. Wood ash also tends to work out really well for your plants. Again, this is optional. If you do not have, it's absolutely okay. But I tend to use at times. And after this basically will help in the aeration of the soil. If there are any fungus or mold, a wood ash tends to reduce that. It also reduces the issue of pest attack or any kind of mold or fungus, so you can use that as well. Do not use it in a very large quantity, guys, because otherwise the soil will turn alkaline. Very little amount of it to be used. Otherwise, there are chances that the soil might turn alkaline. Remember, most of the plants prefer a little slightly acidic soil, so we do not want to add too much of charcoal, or we do not want to add too much of the wood ash. So now that it is done, we can keep it aside for it to dry. Again, which I said will take a lot of time depending upon your environment and climate. Do not let the soil become soggy wet. And this is completely your choice. You can use any organic matter. I do not promote any chemical use, so I only suggest you to use anything that is organic. But what I would suggest is, when you're making this mix, do not add too much of organic matter, because then the soil will be available or will be useful only to certain type of plants. When you're only going to make the soil mix like this and leave it aside, you can later on amend that soil for the plant according to what the plant needs. For example, let's say tomorrow, if the soil is completely dry and it is ready, and if I want to use it for my rose plant, then I can take this soil and then I can amend it depending upon the organic matter, because rose plant needs a lot of organic matter. So let's say if I'm going to take this soil mix, let's say around 50 to 60%, then around 40% or whatever percentage I can use compost, leaf mold, or compost, cow dung, goat manure, anything you can use, and then further mix it. So best is do not add it initially. We have already added compost tea in this to increase the nutrient level or the fertility of the soil. That is more than enough. The soil is going to start getting rejuvenated. So do not mix everything in advance and keep it, because you never know what kind of plant you will be growing later on. So it's always better to keep it a very basic soil. Later on, when you're using this soil mix, you can amend the amount of organic matter depending upon the plant requirement. So you have to be a little bit careful when you're doing this process. Now all this is done. After a month, you will have fresh new soil which is full of live matter in it, which is completely rejuvenated, a good amount of fertility in it, because this compost tea that I've spoke about is very, very essential for the plants. It works out really well. There are no chemicals. It's completely organic from the kitchen waste, so it tends to work out really well. But the only thing is, when you're using it for your plants, if your plant is already in the soil, do not use it in a concentrated form. Always dilute it. You can make, like, let's say if you're taking half a cup of this in this size, then you have to use at least 2 or 3 liters of water. You have to basically dilute it a lot, because it can be very, very strong and it can burn the roots. Over here there was no plant, so I use it directly, because over the period of time it is going to get adjusted in the soil mix. We are going to be keeping it out in the sun. We are going to move it to morning direct sunlight. We are going to be adding water to it, and this soil was already very less on nutrient level, so it will kind of absorb in it, and it is going to work out really well. So guys, that's all about it. I hope that this video on rejuvenating your old soil was helpful to you. If it was, please hit the like button. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing to it. Until then, take care, stay safe, and keep propagating.